So today's session is session 3 of Explain Pain. We're going to be looking at the context of how our brain makes the decision whether or not we're under threat. Again, just to reinforce, this isn't a conscious decision. This is something that happens very, very quickly, way outside of our consciousness to begin with. And it's trying to make a best approximation of how much threat are we under and what it needs to do about it. So I want you to think about factors that might affect our pain. Just take a couple of minutes if you want to. You can pause the video and just scribble down a few ideas. Think about what things might have an influence on the level of pain that we feel, but also whether or not potentially we do feel pain. So just to go through some of the main factors that affect pain. Memory is very, very important. So things that have happened to us in the past, things that have happened to our family members are very, very important. Pain is there as a way of trying to protect us, and we build up this system throughout our lives. It evolves and it changes and it improves and it adapts. So things that have happened to us in the past are going to have an influence on things that happen to us in the future. So if I've maybe suffered an injury to my wrist in the past, I might have fallen over and I hurt my wrist, but it was sore for maybe 20 minutes or so and then settled down very quickly and has never been a problem. The next time I fall over and hurt my wrist, then my brain might conclude that therefore the threat level is fairly low. However, if the last time I fell over and hurt my wrist, it was very, very painful and it didn't settle down after 20 minutes or so and actually carried on that night. And then the next morning I might have gone to hospital. I might have had to have an x-ray. It might have been found to be, say, had a fracture. And I spent 6 weeks in plaster where it was still not right and I had to have an operation and it's never been quite right since. Then actually the next time I fall over and hurt my wrist, the threat level might be perceived to be much higher based on what's happened to me in the past. So previous experience, things that have happened to me in the past will influence then the next time something happens. So if we think about the instance of back pain, for instance, if I pick up the Hoover and the last 20 times that I picked up the Hoover, I was in pain and I ended up in bed for 2 days afterwards because I tried to Hoover the whole house and it set my back off. Then the next time I pick up the Hoover, my body, my brain is already processing that information and might perceive this to be already a threatening activity to try and do before I've even actually started to do very much of it. Equally, things that have happened to family members will have the same sort of effect. So again, if we're aware of someone close to us who might have suffered a similar injury to the one that we think we've just suffered, again, then that may also inform that information. Education, our understanding of a injury or the pain that we may be getting from an area, again, is very, very important. If we understand the pain that we're getting from an area and we're able to reason that through, the threat level may potentially be lower than if we're getting a pain in an area we've never had before and we don't understand what's causing it. So if I've just hit my thumb with a hammer, for instance, I clearly know what's just happened to my thumb. I probably understand that, okay, it's going to be sore, but it's likely to settle down fairly quickly. And if I pop some ice on it, maybe, and then a threat level to my thumb may be relatively low. Equally, if I suddenly start getting some sort of severe abdominal pain in my chest, then, and I don't understand what's causing it, then potentially I might be quite concerned by this. And I might perceive this to be more serious if I don't understand what's causing it. So our understanding of why we're getting the pain is really, really important. And if we've received messages from various different healthcare professionals and we understand it because we've spoken to various different professionals who've explained it well to us, again, that might help. Equally, if we have had pain and it's not been explained very well to us and maybe has even increased the potential threat levels, then again, that might not help with the level of pain that we're in. So how well we understand the pain that we're getting, again, can have a link with the level of pain that we may get. Our beliefs and our culture will have an important influence on our pain. Different cultures will experience and will express pain in very different ways. So if you look across the world, different cultures are differently expressive about different emotions. Some may be bottling more emotions up. Other cultures may be more expressive with their emotions. We know that in some cultures there's initiation ceremonies of the males going from sort of boy to man, and some of those initiation ceremonies can, from a Western standpoint, look quite threatening, quite painful. But actually, because it's part of them proving that they are able to go on to be a man, that those people undergoing those ceremonies can often actually experience very little pain. Again, it's what they're brought up with and what's perceived as culturally normal. So culture and beliefs about what the outcomes should be, again, will have a powerful influence on the level of pain. Gender and age. So again, we know that different genders and different age ranges will again affect the level of pain that we have. For instance, if you look at a young child, often when they fall over and they hurt themselves, there may be that kind of split second whilst they almost kind of look up and look around at those people around them. The reason for that might be because actually they don't have a lot of life experience at that point. They haven't suffered lots of different injuries at that point, and therefore they don't have a good understanding of whether or not they're under threat and under danger, and how quickly it is likely to settle down. So they use the reactions of other people around them to help gauge potentially how much threat they're under. So often when people ignore them, they often kind of get up and dust themselves off and carry on. If there's a big reaction to them, then sometimes they might then burst into tears and take a while for it to settle down. So gender and age could be really important in terms of how much of an experience we might have built up over time versus if we haven't had that issue before. We know that mood has a powerful influence on pain. We know that people who have high levels of stress or high levels of anxiety or maybe low mood can have a real influence on levels of pain. So if we're stressed, we know that will amplify levels of pain. We know that if we're low in mood or we're anxious, again, that will amplify levels of pain. And this can be a really vicious cycle, because often people who are in pain may be frustrated and low that it's preventing them doing what they would want to be doing. Often that then makes their pain worse, and often if their pain worse, then that makes their mood worse. So again, those two can become a very vicious cycle. We know that sleep, again, is another important factor, something that we'll cover in a different education session. But we know individuals who are otherwise fit and well, they've done studies where they've deprived them of sleep for a day or two, and they've all started to suffer aches and pains. So again, if we're not sleeping well, that can amplify our pain levels. If our pain levels are amplified, often that can then have a negative effect on our sleep, sorry. So again, there's a close relationship between sleep levels. The environment that we're in at that moment in time, how cold, how hot it is, how relaxed we feel in that environment, whether we feel supported, if we're supported by who's around us in terms of friends and family versus strangers versus whether we're on our own. All of those different factors will influence the degree of pain that we feel and how we express that. So if we feel uncomfortable in a situation, if we're maybe at the gym, we feel uncomfortable, we don't know anyone else around us, and we suffer some pain, we might react very differently to if we feel very comfortable in that setting, we're with a group of friends that we know well and trust, we might express that pain in a very different way. So the environment that we're in, who we're with, all again have important impact on the level of pain. And there's many other factors that will have an effect on the degree of pain. So there's lots of different things, as well as thinking back to our sight, our smell, our hearing, our taste. Again, all of those different information sources will feed into this decision-making process about how much threat are we in and what do we need to do about it. So there's then this process that occurs called sensitization. The longer that we're in pain for, we said that pain system evolves and adapts. So if we're in pain for a long period of time, that pain system can start to become sensitized. So the threshold of how easy it is to set that system off may start to lower over time. So things like light touch may start to become painful, despite the fact that we're not actually going to be causing damage by just lightly touching something. So it's important how our body is interpreting the message that it's receiving in terms of this pain experience. And we found that actually people living with pain for longer, often that threshold, things are set off more easily. So for instance, they might have been able to walk for maybe an hour before, and now it's come reduced down to maybe 15 minutes. They might have been able to sit for long periods of time, but now again, those sitting times have reduced. So that's the clear indication that that system is becoming more and more sensitive over time. There's reasons for that. The sensors that we talked about in session 2, they have a life period of about 2 to 3 days, and then they die and new ones are created. It's not quite as simple, however, of just replacing a mechanical sensor for another mechanical sensor or a chemical one for another chemical sensor. And what our body actually does is when one of those sensors dies, it looks at what does it need more of in that area at that moment in time. So if we have been repeatedly activating lots of danger sensors in an area and a mechanical sensor dies, then what our body might choose to do is replace that mechanical sensor with a danger sensor in order to try and get more information about the threat that might be occurring in that area. So what we can start to end up with over time is more and more danger sensors in an area that previously might not have had very many, and therefore when we have some potentially dangerous input into that area, we're going to set many more of those danger sensors off, and so we're going to be able to activate that danger message much more easily. There's also changes that happen at that synapse, at that junction between the first nerve and the spinal cord. Again, we said that our brain has influence over the activity at that synapse. And again, the longer we're in pain for, that messages start to get passed over that synapse much more easily. They talk about pain as a tune, and that our body is an orchestra playing that tune. And sometimes there's this idea that our brain can sometimes get stuck on playing this tune. So the messages coming up might not always be danger messages, but actually our brain starts to perceive any message coming up as a potential threat and starts behaving in a way that's very overprotective. And so normal activity and normal inputs to that system can start to be perceived as threatening. And so pain can start to spiral. We're going to move away from pain momentarily, and I'm going to have a little look at vision. Our vision system works in a very similar way to our pain system. So if we have a look at this example, this is a checkerboard, and we have square A and we have square B. I want you to look at these two squares, and I want you to think about whether or not they look the same color or the same shade of grey. And quite clearly, I would imagine most of you are sat there thinking that quite clearly these two squares are different in shade. We're going to now put something over the top of this image, and you start to kind of question the previous answer that you gave. These two lines are actually, as much as it doesn't necessarily always look like it, but they are the same shade of grey all the way from top to bottom. They're both the same shade of grey. Okay. And this starts to make it difficult when you think back to your previous answer of them both being different shades of grey, because now we've put those two lines in, actually they start to maybe look the similar shade of grey, but it doesn't quite fit. If we then put further overlay onto this, we can start to see that actually these may well be the same shade of grey. So we have to think back to what's happening here. The reason why we're seeing these as different colours is because of the context that we're seeing this picture in. We have previous knowledge and understanding about what a checkerboard looks like, and the fact that the shades alternate, and the fact that it always goes lighter, darker. We also got this cylinder, and we know that the right-hand side is looking brighter and the left-hand side is looking darker, and therefore there must be some sort of light source on the right that is shining across this checkerboard and is causing a shadow to be created. It's that understanding and previous knowledge and experience throughout our life that has allowed us to see this image in this way. So vision is similar to pain in that the light hits the back of our sensors in our eyes. The eyes then send that messages along the nerves, which goes to our brain, and our brain actually constructs the image that we see in front of us. So it's these optical illusions that allow us to see that processing going on in real time. We don't make a decision to see the image that we see in this way. We have no influence on trying to see it any different way, but we're making that image based on what we see in front of us and the context that we see it. So actually we find that these squares are the same shade, but we can't see it in the initial picture because of how we construct that image. Equally, if we look at this elephant, if you look at how many feet the elephant has, we know from our life that elephants only have 4 legs. However, in the picture, we can't make it fit with what we expect to see. So in the same way that our brain expects a certain response from certain experiences, sometimes there is a clash with what it predicts versus what's actually happening. And this can happen in pain as well. Sometimes our brain can predict what it thinks will be the outcome, and sometimes that doesn't actually always follow. So sometimes our brain can predict that something's going to be dangerous, and so it will sometimes generate pain as a way of trying to protect us when actually we might not have actually damaged anything. So the elephant has 4 legs, but we can't make the number of legs fit based on what we expect to see, as much as we try and make it happen. If we look at the image on the left, I want you to try and work out, is the cat going upstairs or downstairs? So again, hopefully the more you look at the image, you should find that actually you can make it work both ways. You can make it look that the cat looks like it's going upstairs, or we can make it look like the cat's going downstairs. And in this example, we just don't have enough information to go off. So we make a best guess, but actually we can challenge that by looking at it in a slightly different way. So again, pain works in a very similar situation. Sometimes it has a lot of available information to it, and our brain's able to make a good, accurate guess based on lots of information. Other times our brain doesn't have a lot of information to go off, and it almost has to make a best guess based on the information it has, and sometimes that's not always correct. The dress on the right was an image that went viral a few years ago, and the dress sparked a lot of controversy about what color the dress is. So I want you to look at the dress and just see what color you think it is. For some of you, you'll see the dress as blue and black. For others of you, you'll see the dress as white and gold. Again, now that I've told you those colors, I'm sure you're sat there thinking, well, I can't see it as any other colors than what I originally saw. And the reason for that is how you perceive the dress is based on what's going on around the dress. There's lots of other things happening in this picture that again will inform the shades and the colors that you'll see that dress as. Again, you have no control over this, and that's exactly the same way that pain works. Because we see it in a way doesn't mean that we can make our brain see it any other way just by telling it. So just because we understand that our pain system works in this way doesn't mean that we can influence it just by trying to think about things differently. But it does help to understand the way that it works. So if we go back to this phrase that the doctor said, it's all in my head, and often people have been either sort of given this message directly, or it's sort of seemed like it's been inferred. As I say, it's never in your head. Pain is always absolutely real, and pain always works in this way, no matter the type of pain. And it's down to our brain interpreting the information that it has. It has to make a best guess based on all the information that it has, and there's lots of factors that will affect this decision. It's never a conscious process, but once it decides that it feels that we are under threat, then pain will be conscious, because pain is there to try and protect us, so it needs to make us conscious about that threat, and then we can do something about it. It all happens very quickly and say way outside of our awareness. So some clues that you may have this increased sensitization process going on: the label or the diagnosis that you may have received, Often you receive many different explanations. They might all be quite vague and quite non-specific. The pain might be persisting beyond the tissue healing times that we would expect. So for most tissues in the body, that would be around 3 months. So if your pain's persisting beyond that time that we would expect things to have healed, it might be the fact that there's this sensitization process going on. Pain can spread. So sometimes the pain can be very localized and very easy to pinpoint, but the longer pain goes on for, sometimes it can feel like it becomes less specific. It can start to become a bit more diffuse and spread over a larger area. It can increase over time, and again, that's a clue that the system is starting to turn up that sort of sensitivity of that alarm system. So things start to hurt much earlier than they used to, and more activities start to become painful as time goes on. Our pain can start to become unpredictable. We get flare-ups, which aren't always related to what we maybe have done over the last day or two. We can't think about why our pain is increased, and we can't pinpoint a reason. And sometimes we can even find that we get a bit of a delay before our pain starts. And again, this is a feature of this sensitized system. So actually we might be able to go on a long walk, feel fine, even the next day, and then it might be that even the day after that, then we get this increase in pain. And again, it's this sensitized system that's the reason for that. I hope that helps. We'll look at outputs in the next session.